All right, so to remind us about paper space, we're going to do an in-class assignment together. And I'm just going to, let me pull over a new tab here. I'm going to go to Canvas. Got my microphone plugged in. There we go. Oh, of course. This has been my day. One thing after another. That should be taken care of. We are 12, 10, 13, 10, 13, 10. All right. So once we do this in class, you can submit it. It's going to be this paper space layout and printing. Okay. So this will be the assignment, and we'll do it in class, and then you can just submit it. Now, there is a file that you can begin with. It's called Layout in Class. And if you go to File Explorer, we go to this PC, we're going to go to CAD Common, and we go to Arch, 1310, Drawings, Layout in Class, right there. Yes. Okay, here we are. So I just want to remind you, I think, and it seems like everybody is kind of catching on to the idea, but paper space is somewhat of a tricky idea for most beginning AutoCAD students, right? The idea that we draw one place, that we print from another place, we have these viewports that we have to somewhat use to scale these objects in one place to another place, and how that sort of works, right? So I like to go over it just a couple times to make sure everybody's pretty clear on the idea. I want to reiterate that right now I'm in model space, right? I know I'm in model space because it has a black background. And when I'm in model space, I draw things to real world scale, okay? And what that means is that if I've drawn a 2x4 or a 2x6 wall here, right? If I were to measure something, right? Well, this is not the right size, right? But it would be the real world size, right? So 2x6, somebody drew it actually as 2 inches by 6 inches, but it is real world scale, okay? So I draw these things real world scale, but then I have to translate them to a piece of paper, right? So I have to take that large physical size and somewhat translate it onto a piece of paper, okay? And we do that using scale. We can print from model space, right? We talked about that. So we can come in here, we can print things to scale from model space. But in model space, the weakness that we have is that we can only, within the same page, print one scale, right? So I can print multiple drawings, but they all have to be scaled to an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch, or, they have to be this identical scale. And at times, I want to maybe print this object at one scale, 1/2 inch is equal to a foot, and I want to print this other object at a different scale, right? 1/4 inch is equal to a foot. And so in model space, that's not, we can't do that, right, without some really big finagling. And so in the case where we want to be able to do that, we're going to flip over here to paper space, okay? So paper space is under these layout tabs, right? Paper space is a piece of paper, okay? And one thing I really want you to understand is that when I'm in paper space like this, when I go to print something, okay, when we print something, we print at 1:1 scale, okay? So that means that whatever is on this piece of paper, whether I've scaled it with a viewport or I've created text, it prints at 1:1 scale. So that means if I create text in paper space that's 1/2 inch tall, it's going to print at 1/2 inch tall at 1:1 scale, okay? Does that idea somewhat make sense to everybody? It gets a little confusing because in model space things are real world scale, but they're not printed at 1:1. And in paper space, these are scaled down so they're 2 inches by 3 inches, so they're not real world scale, right? In paper space, viewing them, but we print to 1:1 scale. So the topics are somewhat opposite depending on what view you're in AutoCAD. We'll let that sink in a little bit, right? Okay. So first thing we're going to do when we come over here to paper space and we want to print something, step number 1 is we want to make sure that we have the right page size illustrated. Okay, this is probably the #1 most biggest mistake that beginning students in AutoCAD make. They know how to draw in model space. They know how to flip over to a layout tab and create a page setup. They know they have to use a viewport. They know they have to scale the viewport. They know they have to print it, right? But you always forget to make sure you have the right page size, right? So you can do everything else, but you always forget that, you know, hey, what page size was this, okay? If you don't have the correct page size before you go to print, then it's going to affect how your scale, how large things or how large or small things can be on your page, right? How big or small your scale is going to be. So in paper space, I can use the distance command, D-I-S-T, enter, click, click, and I can look down here and get a somewhat of an idea of how big that page is, 11 inches, okay? And I can hit enter and reinitiate the distance command, and I can click, click, and it's 8.5. Great, right? So I can generally say that this is an 8.5 by 11 inch page, all right? If I'm unsure, okay? There are two ways that we can change the page size. There's kind of the easy, quick way, and then there's the way that will benefit you in the future, right? Adding page setups to your template file. I'm going to go the quick route because, you know, kind of lazy today maybe, I don't know. But it tends to be maybe as you're doing these individual assignments, probably the way that you're going to do it most often, right? So we'll just illustrate that. To set up this page, kind of quote the quick way, I'm going to do Control P, pretend like I'm printing. And I'm going to change all of these print settings to be what I would actually use when I'm printing, right? And then I'm going to hit Apply to Layout. When I change my print settings and then I choose Apply to Layout, that establishes those settings onto the piece of paper, okay? So if I change the page size, whatever I do, right, it's going to illustrate that on the page behind here. So I'm going to choose my PDF creator or a physical printer if I want to physically print. We'll do an arch size D. Well, let's do an 11 by 17. 11 by 17. Okay. So we'll do this in class together and then just submit whatever we do in class together and you'll get credit for it. Okay. We're going to choose here extents. Okay. I'm going to choose center the plot. Now, if I had chosen layout, do you see how my center of the plot goes away, right? Layout means that it's going to, that AutoCAD will take this piece of paper and print to the extent of the layout, right? And that's okay. What that means is that wherever your object is on your page, it's going to print, whether that's centered or not, right? What I like about extents is that it takes the extent of the drawing, which is generally the layout anyway, right? We don't draw things past this piece of paper or put things on this piece of paper to print, right, that extend beyond that boundary. But what I like about this is that I can choose center the plot with extents, and then whatever's on my page gets centered, right, instead of kind of being slightly off center, right? Let's see, I'm going to choose the scale as 1:1, right? We're in paper space, everything is 1:1, so we don't have to change that. I'm going to choose my pens right here, LaserJet CTB. If I don't choose those and I create a PDF, right, then my lines are going to print in color. We don't want our lines to print in color. We want them to have pen weights associated with them and be black and white. And I'm going to choose whether I want landscape or portrait. Let's do landscape for now. So I have everything set up to print. I'm going to hit Apply to Layout. Okay. Now if I were to hit OK, it would plot this page, whether it's a PDF plot or, you know, a physical print or whatever. If I hit OK, it prints it out. If I hit Apply, it just applies those settings to that page. Now I'm going to hit Cancel. And that's kind of the quick way of applying a page size to my drawing page. Okay. Just a reminder, I won't go through the whole thing, but the kind of, I mean, in the roundabout way, the easier way of going about this would be to right-click on the Layout tab, choosing Page Setup Manager, adding a page setup here with all the preset settings, right, and using that every time to establish your page sizes. Now if I were to measure this page, DIST, enter, distance, and I click up in the corner once, and I come over here, and I click again, I can generally see that's 17 inches. Great. I hit enter again, click, click, and I've got 10 7/8, bless you, close enough to 11, right? So that is, now I know, an 11 by 17. And it makes a big difference, right? Because this viewport kind of filled up the whole page on my 11 by 17, leaving no room for anything else, right? But on an 11 by 17 here, right, I can add another viewport and have plenty of room, okay? All right. This object right here is called a viewport. A viewport acts like a pair of scissors, right? It cuts a hole in paper space so that you can view what you've drawn in model space behind it, okay? And it also zooms that drawing in and out, uses a zoom factor to scale it, right? If you were ever wondering, right, in the middle of the night wondering what that scale factor in our AutoCAD scale factor chart means, it's on the last page of our book, where we see 1/2 of an inch is equal to a foot, and the scale factor is 24, right? That means there's a zoom factor of 24 times. It has to zoom in 24 times, right? And that will allow the drawing to scale, right? So if I click here and I zoom in, that's called a zoom factor, right? So AutoCAD does an automatic zoom factor that you tell it to do, and that's how it scales things. It zooms in and out, in and out, right? And that's how the system works, right? Essentially, we draw really big things in model space, we view them through paper space, and we zoom in and out to get them scaled, right? That's how the system works. Makes sense. These viewports, we create them, and they look like, you know, any other type of square geometry, but really they're kind of a special geometry that we don't ever want to see, right? We don't want it printed because it can be mistaken for some other type of, you know, buildable object on your page, right? So we create our viewports and then we put them on a non-printable layer, right? So we come up here to Layer, Properties, click. We click on New, Layer, and Viewport, enter. And it doesn't really matter what color it is because it's not going to be printable. But the way that I make this non-printable is by clicking on this little plotter right here. Click. Okay. I close that out, and now I can select my viewport. I can come up here, drop down, change the viewport to the viewport layer, and when I print, now that viewport is invisible, right? It's still viewable on the screen. I can still see it and manipulate it and move it, but it won't print, okay? All right, I'm gonna delete this viewport. I'm gonna grab it and hit delete, okay? And we're gonna create a few more new viewports that we're going to generate on the viewport layer. So I'm gonna drop down, change to viewport layer. That's my current layer now. I can shortcut with my keyboard MV, make view, MV, enter, and I can click again, and I create a viewport, okay? I can also go to layout, there it is, and I can go to rectangular viewport here. I can click on rectangular, right? Click, and there's my rectangular viewport, okay? It did create it, but you didn't see that you kind of have, if I hit M from you have a viewport within a viewport. Okay. Yeah. Did you have a question, Colin? No, you're good. Okay. You're viewporting it up over there, huh? What's that? That's what I did. I got you. Good. Success. All right. So we have a lot of viewports here, right? We can scale our viewports. Before we do that, I want to show you something. This is, again, you know, I have a fear of what I'm about to do because, say, back in the day, right? AutoCAD had sometimes issues when you copied viewports, but again, things have gotten a lot better in AutoCAD, so I should maybe let go of a few of those things, right? But you can copy viewports, and hopefully they don't wreak havoc in your drawings. But if I have this viewport here, for example, I can go to copy, click, select the viewport, hit enter, click, and I can also copy those, right? They can be any shape or size, right? I can make them large or small. I can stack them one on top of another. M for move, right? M for move, looks pretty good. M for move, looks pretty good. Here we go. Okay, I have my viewports. Now it's time for me to capture what I want the user of these to view in these viewports, right? To capture or to sort of crop out what I don't want or show only what I want to show. I'm going to click, and I'm going to engage the viewport. Okay, when I click in a viewport, it engages it and it becomes active, And I know that because, and I can visually see that it's an active viewport because it has a dark outer boundary, right? As opposed to these viewports, right, which are not. Now, at the time, you know, when I activate this viewport and I zoom in or I zoom out, right, I'm actually engaging model space right now. So anything that I do in model space will happen to this drawing. So if I click on that object and I hit delete or copy or move something or rotate something, it all happens in model space, which means that anything that, you know, if I'm viewing something more than once through a viewport, it will affect all of those views, okay? All right, so this assignment, the layout assignment, let me pull it up here real quick. Okay, let's see, paper, space, layout, and printing. So there is, let's see, down below here, this is the one we're working on, I believe. Sorry, let me just make sure. Yes, this is the one we're doing in class together, okay? And I believe you have one more. Yeah, you'll do this on your own. This one you'll do on your own, okay? But essentially what we want to see here is, well, let's look at the assignment. No, I don't have it on here. There we go, layout assignment from the book. Okay, create, and let me just say this, we're not going to create any named views, right? So don't worry about doing that with this assignment. Named views in AutoCAD, I feel like are somewhat outdated, and I know that Jeff really likes them, but honestly, in all the years I've worked, I've never once professionally ever created a named viewport or created a named view, and so if I'd maybe used it one time, I'd have a different opinion. But I just have never used them. So if you see something that says create two named views or create a named view, don't worry about it, all right? But let's see, create two viewports, and we're going to do 11 by 17 just because that's what we've already created. It doesn't say, it doesn't give a scale, but essentially create two viewport scale. The scale for each viewport is noted on the attached handout. Type in the, okay. Oh, it does. So for this first object, we want it to be scaled at 1/2 inch. For the second object, we want it to be scaled at 3/4. Okay. We're just going to keep our page size 11 by 17, so these might be slightly smaller than are shown on that page I just showed you. Okay. But looks like we have one too many viewports, so I'm going to grab this one, M for move. It's good experience moving these things about, right? M for move, kind of move this up here. You'll notice I can object snap to them, right? I can get the endpoint, the midpoint, right? I can grab this, I can move this out and make it bigger or smaller. Okay. I could even, if I wanted to, delete the second one and copy this first one, right? Do that. Now, you'll want to make these viewports large enough that you can capture your objects in them, but I want to remind you that these aren't going to print, right? So if they overlap a little or if they're slightly larger than you think they need to be, don't worry too much about it because they won't print. I'm going to click in that first viewport. I'm going to zoom into this first detail and kind of, you know, place it in the center. I'm going to come over here to this second viewport, click, zoom out, zoom into this skylight detail. And then over here, I can double click out of that viewport, right? Or I can type PS, paper space, enter, okay? And I'm out of that viewport, okay? So I have one viewport, I have a second viewport. Is everybody up to speed here? You have some trouble there, Steve? Let's see, you got a viewport within a viewport. I think all you need to do is double click out here, click. Move this guy over. Click. So Emma had kind of an interesting problem. She could see the drawing on her page, but she couldn't engage it at all, right? And so the setting, what had happened, let me just show you what had happened, right? This is what hers looked like, and she was trying to click everywhere, and it was just not working. We couldn't, and what essentially had happened is she had accidentally frozen the viewport layer, but not just like frozen it. She had, oh, I think I undid it. There we go. She had clicked this setting, which is freeze through the viewport, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. But essentially, she had a visibility setting problem, right? And so I came in here, I clicked on that little thaw, right? Without even knowing what the problem was, I knew there was a little sunshine there, and I know that that's freeze thaw, right? So even though I don't know exactly what that setting does, I know it shouldn't be set that way, right? So I just undo it. Oh, hopefully. Ooh. See if I can get it to come back now. What have I, oh, it's still up there. There we go. Okay, so now it's back. Okay. All right, so now it's time for me to scale these, and I can't remember what the scales are, so I'll just make it up. I'll just make them fit the page. So we're gonna grab this first one, come down here, and we'll choose like 1/4 of an inch. Oop, way too small.
On the scale?
Uh-huh.
The one that looks like a roof.
Uh-huh.
1/2 inch equals 1 foot.
Okay, this one's 1/2. So we'll change that.
Not that one.
Oh.
That one.
Well, they're both on the roof, sorry.
Yeah,
That was
the right one is 1/4.
So this one right here will be 1/2. Okay, so we'll change that to 1/2, which it is, good. And this one will be 3/4. So we'll change that to 3/4. Click, click. I can move it over. Now I can engage, after I've scaled things, I can engage the viewport and I can move things around or, do whatever I need to do. I just need to make sure that I don't roll my mouse button, because the second that something is scaled and I go into the viewport and roll my mouse button, the middle roller, right, it breaks the scale because we're essentially zooming in and out at that point, right? And zoom factor is based on scale, okay? Or sorry, scaling is based on a zoom factor. So when I zoom, I break the scale factor.
You did the second one on 1/16, you said, or
3/4.
3/4?
Yep. Click, click. I'm out. Grab the viewport. We'll make this 3/4. There we go. Looks pretty good. Okay. So final step in this assignment, right? We have our viewports created. These look pretty good. Things that I look for when I'm grading, right? I mean, obviously I want you to have done the assignment right, but other things that I will comment on, right? This assignment, making sure the viewport is non-printable, right? Those are points that are easily lost on assignments. So if you create a PDF and you can see your viewport lines, go back and turn them off real quick, right? Because that's easy points lost. If you're, this is not a requirement, but we're all, going to be working in the design field, whether as an engineer, an architect, an interior designer, right? Whatever we're going to be. Your drawings say something about you, right? They talk about your, your kind of almost your design philosophy, your neatness, your craft, right? All things my design students now don't like to hear very much, right, Paul and Jake? But it's important, right? Craft of drawing is just as important as craft of the design projects we're working on. So we like things to look nice and neat on the page. We want them lined up. I don't prefer to have this kind of way up in one corner or this kind of skiwampus over here, right? Unless, skiwampus, I just used the word. Sorry, we had a conversation about that earlier. I have no idea. Is anybody here from Alabama? We had a student from Alabama, and he had a word comparable to skiwampus, but it was like how swampy mom or something. I don't know. We'll have to have him spell it for us phonetically. I'm going to start using it. This is, we want things to look nice and neat. So line them up, make sure they look good on the page, make sure your viewports don't print. Print using your pen files because, again, those are easy points lost, right? Control P to print. And because I have applied all of these page settings to my drawing, if I preview it now and I look at it, it looks great, right? If my viewports had not been set to print, or are set to non-printable, then they would have shown up, you know, kind of framing these objects, essentially. Okay. So to finish this assignment, we're going to hit OK, and we'll give it a name, layout in class. Oh boy. Layout in class, save, and your PDF prints like this. Okay. One thing for all of your PDF assignments, if you could just go to File or to Edit, let's see, and View, just kidding, View, and rotate these for me. It makes my life so immensely better. So that they read the correct way, right? So when you upload them to Canvas, that they appear this way in Canvas for me to sketch over or make comments on, okay? But this is essentially what I'm looking for this assignment right now. We're going to learn text today, so you can just submit this as is. Don't worry about putting the text on it just yet. We'll get to that in the next couple days, okay? PDF and DWG file. Always submit both. Yep, always submit both. Yours are off? Oh, let's look. Hit escape. Let's take a look. Good question. So,
She said 11 by 17 or 9. No, she said archie and she's like, oh wait, never mind. 11 by 17. So I was not 11 by 17. It looks good. I don't know about now. That was amazing.
okay. So you can, I'm just going to use this actual drawing for the next portion of our lecture. So if you want to, this would be what you can turn in and get credit for, right? If you want to hold on and add text to it, that would be great too. But I'm just going to keep this file open and I'm going to add text, and we're going to talk about text within this file, okay? Okay. So I'm just going to give you a little warning again, and Naima and I are kind of working on this book. We're making a lot of updates to it because the book is still really good. It's still really valid, but it's several years old, right? It hasn't been updated, I don't think, since 2015 or 16, so it's about 3 versions behind. And one of the kind of biggest differences between this book and the assignments in here and what we're going to talk about in class today is annotative text, okay? We, as of this booklet, had not integrated annotative text into AutoCAD. And I think that at this point in time, it's necessary. So we're going to depart from the book with regard to text and dimensions a little bit. Some of the settings for dimensions will still be the same, but there will be one major difference, which we'll talk about. But with regard to text, the way that we're going to do it is going to be immensely easier, right? So if you look at kind of the text styles section in the book, it starts on page, my book at least is 1-64. In fact, let me just pull it up on the screen here. So many things to do. Downloads. Here we go. Okay. So here is how we in the book it shows to create text, right? And there's a lot of things about determining text size, creating multiple text sizes, all of that good stuff, different text sizes, different text styles, multi-line text, single line text, model space versus paper space with regard to text, you know, there's a lot having to do with that. And when we use, and this is not using annotative text, when we use annotative text, a lot of this is going to be made a lot more simple, okay? So just disregard most of what's in here. Our assignment will be the same, but you'll be able to do the assignment, you know, without using this method, right? We'll use the method that we talk about in class. I'm going to illustrate what we used to do. Let me, before I get going here, let me just create a little bit of text. This one is going, what scale was this? This was half, 3/4, right? It was half? Okay. This one was 3/4. Okay. All right, so it looks good. All right, so just a couple reminders as to the scale. Now, one thing, when I created this text, I want to look at the properties of this text because I just want to show you, I guess maybe how difficult text used to be and how easy it is now. Those of you that know Revit a little bit or have used Revit or taking Revit right now, text and dimensions are so easy in Revit, right? Just super simple. They scale, you know, when you change the scale, and it just makes everything really, really easy. By default, that up until the last few years, that hadn't been solved in AutoCAD. So if you change the scale of your drawing, your text wouldn't scale with it. It would be the wrong size and it would print too big or too small. Okay, and annotative, having the annotative function in AutoCAD has somewhat taken care of that. Okay, me just saying that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, right? So let me show you what that means. All right, I'm going to go actually back to my paper space and I'm going to look at this piece of text and I want to see how tall this piece of text is. Okay, I'm going to type li, enter. That's a list. What list does is it will allow you to look at different properties of items in AutoCAD, right? You may not remember, but we kind of talked about lists maybe one of our first days. So I'm going to list this text and it tells me that it is 1/4 of an inch tall. Okay, so that means that when I take my piece of paper here and I print this out at 1:1 scale, so it prints at 11 by 17, right? That piece of text is going to be 1/4 of an inch tall. I can take out a ruler and I can measure it, right? And I can also measure here distance and see that it's 1/4 of an inch tall. Great. Okay. Let me show you what would happen if I put a piece of 1/4 inch text next to this drawing. Hold on, I have to do something really quick first though. Hold on. Giving away all the secrets. Okay. So if I go in here and I create some text without you really knowing how to do any of this, I can click and I could type in 1/4 of an inch, right? Enter, enter. And this will say something like Eve detail, enter, close out of it. Okay. So that text that is 1/4 of an inch tall here, right? See ya. When I go back over to my layout page, you know, this is 1/4 of an inch tall. That text was 1/4 of an inch tall. Why is there such a big discrepancy, right? And the reason is because when you scale something, you zoom in, you zoom out to make the scale factor happen, right? So this has been zoomed out 48 times or 24 times in order for this object to read to scale, right? Which means that 1/4 inch text has been scaled out 48 times. It's been zoomed out 48 times, which ultimately makes it, if I were to print this, it would look like a tiny little dot on the page. It wouldn't even be readable, right? And so the way that text translates through model space is that actually we have to scale it up so that it looks bigger in model space for it to then scale back down through paper space to be readable, right? So let me look here and see how big. We're not going to go through this because you're not going to do it this way, but let me just look here real quick. So in actuality, if I wanted to create text that when I printed it out in paper space appeared at 1/4 of an inch, I would actually have to make it 6 inches tall in model space. So I would create text. I would click here. I would make it 6 inches. Do you see I'm typing 6 inches at the command line? Enter, enter again, and type. You see the difference, right? That's 6 inch text. If I go to paper space, it's the same size as this, right? Okay, so I had to scale it up to 6 inches so that when it was zoomed out at, you know, scale factor of 24, that it appeared to be the same size as this text right here, right? Super confusing, right? Like, I don't like that at all. And it's not, you know, you look at this, you're like, okay, it's confusing, but big deal, right? Well, it's not really a big deal in this instance, but when you have a set of drawings that's 400 pages, right? And you have to change the scale of them, and you have all of those dimensions, all of those tags, all of those pieces of text on those drawings, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. You have to rework all of the annotation in a set of drawings in AutoCAD if you change the scale of a drawing, okay? And that's the inherent problem. The annotation in AutoCAD is, I'll just say it, is terrible. Annotating in AutoCAD is terrible, right? Annotating in Revit is really nice. Annotating in AutoCAD is really terrible a lot of the time. Until annotative text came about. Even still, it's a little bit cumbersome, but it's a lot better than it used to be. So inherently, what we want to do is we want to not have to think about this translation. We want to be able to tell AutoCAD, I don't care how big it needs to be in model space. I just want my text when it prints out to look a 1/4 inch tall. That's all I care about, right? We don't care about it needs to be 6 inches or 9 inches or 4 3/4. I don't care how tall it needs to be, just make it look right, okay? And essentially that's what annotative text does, okay? So the way that annotative text works, and I'm just gonna create, don't worry about doing this yet, we'll do it together in a minute, is that I can create an annotative text height that's 1/4 inch, text 1/4 inch. Oh, just kidding. I can make it annotative. I can say I want it to be 1/4 inch tall, no matter what. I specify that. I can hit apply, set current. I'm going to close that out. I'm going to create some text. Oh, nope, sorry, I have to do one thing first. That one was 1/2 inch. Okay. I do have to do a tiny bit of finagling, but this, what I'm doing now, and there's some things we can do to mitigate it, is way easier than having to worry about, he's in the other classroom, Bon. You're looking. They're all gathering for studio later tonight. Getting ready. But by creating this setting and then doing what I'm going to do now is much easier than having to go back and change my text later. So now if I create some text, okay, it works, right? And now when I come over here into my paper space, it works, right? I didn't have to say it was 6 inches tall. I just had to create an annotative text style, or a text style with annotative features, okay, that then did all the thinking for me, right? This is inherently what Revit does, and you didn't know it because, you know, you hadn't experienced AutoCAD yet if you've used Revit, but it takes all the guesswork out of it. So this is the way we're going to work from now on, which departs from Jeff's style in his book, essentially, right? The way that we used to have to use AutoCAD was we would have about 10 different text styles, and when you were working at 1/4 inch, you went to 1/4 inch text style, right? And you created all your text, and then when you needed to do something at 1/2 inch, you went to your 1/2 inch text style and you created all your 1/2 inch text, and then so it just got really, really cumbersome. And then if somebody changed their mind, right, your whole design is dependent on not changing the scale of your AutoCAD drawings, really. Then if somebody changed something, then you'd have to go back and alter it all. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we are going to learn how to create annotative text. Okay, that'll be today. And then on Wednesday, we'll talk about annotative dimensions, okay, which have text in them that also needs to be scaled at the right size to be readable. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, do you guys mind if I take a quick break here real quick? This takes like 5-10 minutes. Be right back. I need
You're just sitting watching.
all of you guys sign up for Habitat for Humanities, the build that we're doing?
Oh yeah.
Jeez. What's that?
Where do you sign up for that?
In the lounge right by my office, there's a round table with a bunch of forms. Have you not heard about it? Let me see.
I'm sure you probably mentioned it last semester from time to time, but I don't know. Let me see Paul.
Well, we're doing a habitat build, and it's going to be, I think, March. So Saturday, March 10th is full. Friday the 9th, and then Wednesday is the 7th. So all the details are down in my office suite. You just sign up, but I think we have room left on Wednesday and Friday for the build. So, but there's going to be 15 people each day. It's from, I think you have to be at the meeting site at 8:30. It's from 8:30 to 3. So if you want to go, I'll excuse you from class if you want to go to the Habitat build on Wednesday, the 7th. So anyway, I'll be there on Saturday. The Saturday's full, if any of you signed up. All right. Any questions so far? Yes. Okay. Text. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, let's go through. That's going to be in the text style. We'll talk about that next. Okay. So how do we actually generate text is maybe your question, right? Okay. So again, we'll get going on the topic today, and we'll finish it on Wednesday, and we'll do dimensions. But let's talk about actually generating text. And I want to talk about the two different kinds of text that we have in AutoCAD. Okay. We have what's called single line text, and we have multi-line text. Okay. If I just type the command text, T-E-X-T, enter, and I'm in model space, right? And let me preface this by saying your settings are not set up yet, so it may not completely work for you. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of a, right here, let's change this to maybe like, type in like 6 inches. I think you can type. Oh shoot, no, my text style is controlling it. Hold on. You can't type it. Okay. Well, you're going to have your standard text size created. Anyway, so let me show you how it works. Then we'll talk about defining a style, and then you'll be able to try it, essentially. Okay. Let me first start by saying that all of our annotation, all of our text and dimension settings are going to be on the annotate tab here. So if I, in my home tab, I come over here to annotate, right? That is where all of my dimension styles are going to be. Okay, so the dimension style that I'm currently using, and likely that you all have in AutoCAD, is going to be called standard. If I use the drop down here, I get what's called a gallery view of all of the different styles that are generated in AutoCAD. And I think by default you just have the standard view created when you kind of have out of the box AutoCAD. Okay. This little flyout menu down here, this little text area where it says this flyout says text style. If I click on that, I get the text style dialog box. This will allow me to define other styles, right, that I can name. I'm going to hit escape. If I look right here, I have a multi-line text button, and if I drop down, see there's a little drop down right there, I get single line. Okay, there's single line. Single line text is essentially, you can create more than one line of text with single line text, but the entry is somewhat more simplistic than multi-line text. But the intent is that if you just need to create a quick piece of text, a string of text, you'll use single line text. Okay. Multi-line text functions more like a word processor, and it will let you sit and type paragraphs of text all at the same time. Okay, so those are our two different kinds of text. We have single line and multi-line. If I click on multi-line, the first thing it's going to do, let me just show you these things and then we can practice them. It's going to ask me to click again, and I'm going to define a text box, right? And if you notice that once this text box is generated, that I get a bunch of different paragraph type options up here, right? So things like justification, paragraph options, bullets and numbering, line spacing, the height of my text, what type of font I want to use, right? But essentially when I start this mtext function, you know, I get this popping up. And this function's just like a word processor, like Word or Notebook or whatever you use to create your word processing, okay? So when I'm in multi-line text, I have to first define the text box, and then I can start typing. 1, 2, 3, 4, enter. And when I'm done entering text, I come up here to close text, click, okay? With single line text, I click on single line text, and I don't get bumped into the, hey, let's draw a text box, right? It says down here at the bottom of the command line, it says specify the top left corner or specify your justification. So here, top left was the last justification I chose, but essentially this is going to be more of a select your justification, click and start typing, instead of the multi-line where it's more paragraph formatted. With
I need to get that. It said specify start point, but then it said specify left corner.
right, mine is remembering what I did last, and so that's why it's saying that. So yours might just say something like specify first corner or specify justification or something like that. Now, if you want to specify the justification, right, whether it's middle, center, top left, top right, you can click on justify right here. Click justify, and you have all of these different types of justifications. Left, center, right, align, middle, fit, top left, top center, top right, middle left, middle center, middle right, bottom left, bottom center, bottom right. Anything your little heart desires is right there, right? So I'm going to choose one. I'm just going to choose top center, TC. I could type TC, enter. I could click on it, click, specify top center, click, specify the height if we need to, enter, specify the rotation angle. Do I want it upside down? Do I want it 45 degrees, 90 degrees, whatever? Here I want it to be 0, so I'm going to type 0, enter, and I can start typing 1, 2, 3, 4. If I hit enter, enter, I can wrap text 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, right? So I can hit enter and keep wrapping. I can click over here if I want. So if I'm done, you know, creating my text, I can hit enter and it ends the command. But if I'm creating my text and I, for example, click over here, I can click, type, click, type, click, type, click, type. Right, so if you're wanting to create a bunch of different little strings of text all over your page, like over here I want to click and I want to type detail, and then over here click skylight, click roof detail, click gutter detail, right? Enter, enter, and I get out of that. So single line text is a little bit more quick text, essentially. You want to be able to jump all over the place, create, you know, single lines of text. Multi-line text is more for paragraph, right? So if we were thinking in terms of a set of drawings, single line text like this would be for maybe something, we'll make it simplistic, like adding room names to a floor plan, right? I can jump around, I can add room names, right? Click, 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 click. Something like multi-line text would be more for adding general notes, right? The general notes, like if we look over here, you have these long paragraphs of text that you have on drawings sometimes, right? This would be more of a multi-line type application. Okay. Does everybody kind of understand the difference between multi-line and single line? Okay, the idea that we have the option to choose them here. We have the option of choosing the style of text here, okay? And then we have the option of changing the text style or adding a style here. All right. Okay, so let's talk about creating a text style, right? And text style is very directly related to the idea of text height, okay? So again, by default, if I click on standard here, I have a gallery, which is a kind of a quick preview of all of the different styles that are associated in my AutoCAD, or that are in my AutoCAD file right now. A style is essentially like, it's a predefined text style, which means the style has the font, it has the height, it has any other width or narrowness, associations kind of defined into that font, right? So I'll show you that in a second. To create a new style, I'm going to click on this little icon, this little flyout, text style, click, and I enter the text style dialog box here, right? These are the 3 text styles that I have currently. If I click on Arch Hand, it looks like it's an Arial font. It's a regular font style. The height is 1/8 of an inch. It's not annotative, okay? And this is what it looks like. I have standard. It's a sans serif with not a height associated with it, and that's what it looks like. If I click on text quarter, which is the one I just created today, this is an annotative text font, so it has annotated check mark next to it. It also has this little symbol right here, okay? This little symbol, can anybody tell me what that little symbol is? What's that? That's right. You're the first one who's gotten that in a really long time. Oh, was it? Okay, never mind. Boo. No. Good job. Good job for being prepared. I didn't think of that. All right. Gave that one up. Nobody ever knows that. So anyway, funny enough. But this is the end of a scale, right? Anyway, so it was Naima's video technically, right? So we didn't go over it. But that little symbol will mean it's an annotative text, right? So it means it has the ability to essentially, annotative means it will change per different scales that we're using, right? So if this text needs to be, 1/4 of an inch tall when it's printed, right, in paper space, it may actually mean that it needs to be 10 or 12 inches in model space, right? And we don't want to think about that translation. We just want it to happen, and annotative will make that happen. It makes it flex, essentially, okay? So I'm going to create a new text style today. I'm going to click on New, and let's just call this Practice Style, and we'll make it a 1/2 inch tall. Okay. Oh, of course. That's why I always spell everything out. 1/2. Okay. So what I need to do now is I need to click on my practice style 1/2. I need to change the font. We'll just choose kind of a nice little Swiss LTBT maybe. There we go. It's a good font. It'll light. That's fine with me. The main thing that we want to make sure that we have checked here is the annotative option. Okay, so I click on annotative, and that makes that text font flex sizes. Now I need to specify what size I want this to be when it's printed. So if I've named it 1/2, that likely means that I want it to be a 1/2 inch tall. Okay. Width factor, maybe we'll just for fun, we'll make it 0.80, right? The width factor will make it look narrower than it should be, right? If I make it 50%, see how it really narrows up. If I make it 75%, it makes it more spacious. I can click upside down. Prince, this might be the problem you were having, right? Upside down or backwards text, where I uncheck it. There you go. Backwards text. I have never used these. Right? I don't even know, honestly, why they have them. For real, if you want your text backwards, you can mirror it, right? If you want it upside down, you can rotate it. I don't really understand why this would be defined as a style, because, not once have I ever used it. Anyway, but it's there in case you need it. Okay. So we'll just leave the width factor at 0.75 just for fun. I've got everything looking pretty good. I can hit set current. Do you want to save your changes? Yes. And I'm going to close that out. And now when I look here under my style, right, I have that practice style 1/2 inch, right? And the gallery view allows me to see a little preview of what it's going to look like, okay? I can click on it to select it. And now any text that I generate will look like that practice style 1/2, okay? I'm going to delete some of this text here. There we go. Delete, delete, delete. Looks good. Okay. So let's create some text. Okay. I'm going to start with single line text. It's pretty easy for us to generate. I'm going to click on this single line text. I could also just type text at the command line. T-E-X-T, enter. Okay. By doing that, when I type text, it automatically defaults me into the single line text function or option. I'm going to make sure that my practice style half is chosen. Okay. Now, the only sort of finicky item, and we're going to somewhat keep it easy today. We'll add some more options to this next time we meet for the annotative options. We're just going to keep it really simple. The way that we want to create our annotative text is we want to think about first what scale we're going to be printing this at. Okay, so this one, I don't remember what scale it was going to be printed at. Let's look. Oop. That one's at 1/2 inch. Okay. So I'm going to start my text again. Now what I need to do down here is I need to have this little annotative objects option checked, so it's blue, okay, for now. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to change, essentially we're going to set the annotative scale of our model space. So I'm going to change this from whatever it is, it's likely going to be 1:1 right now. I'm going to change that to 1/2 inch. And changing this to 1/2 inch tells AutoCAD, okay, the text that I generate is going to be scaled at 1/2 inch. So I have to make it however big it needs to be in order for it to scale down and look the right size when it's printed. That's essentially what it does, okay? So now that I have changed that to 1/2 inch, I can click my text. I can choose a justification if I want. Right now I'm just going to click to start my text. Hit enter to choose a 0 rotation. Type my name, click over here, detail, click over here, wall, click over here, 1, 2, 3, and when I'm done, hit enter, enter, and I finish my text. Yep, let's do it one more time. Okay, which part? Just creating it? The actual command?
Yeah, no,
from sorry, what was that? From just generate, let's create some text and we'll create another style. How about that? Okay, so let's create some more text. I click on single line text, click. It says specify, whatever point on the text, click. Specify the rotation angle. We don't want a rotation angle, we want it at 0, so I'm just gonna hit enter. Now I'm gonna start typing. 1, enter, 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, enter. When I'm done, I hit enter again, and I get out of it. Okay, let me add a little bit more text. Click, click again, enter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, when I'm done, enter, enter. Did that work?
Mine's just small.
Yours is small?
Yeah, mine is small as well.
Okay, so if it's really small, I'm going to go back to the text style and look at it. So right here under text, I'm going to open it up. Practice style half. Do you have your annotative checkbox checked in here?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Do you have it paper text height set to 1/2 inch?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now do you have this the annotative scale of the view set to 1/2?
Yeah.
Okay, so this should be 1/2. Okay. So what that means is that it's going to scale it up so when it's viewed at 1/2 inch scale, it would be appropriate. Let me look. Like a tiny bit tricky.
Really the same problem where it's 6 inches up here, but it's 1/2.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yours looks good. Is that the text you created?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. So let's do click on single line. Click. Yep. Enter. so it's saying 6 because of a half inch.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, that I'm the choice between these three.
No, because this is going to be, you do or don't. Is that what you're
Well, because you have 60.
So don't worry about that right now. Your text style will control that. So if you click on that arrow right there. Okay, so do the half inch is annotated. Okay, cancel that out. At a half inch, right? Now if you go to single line text, click there. And click computer space. Click. Sorry, not to. Now hit enter. And type some text. Okay, enter. Now let's just verify and see what it's real quick. So now you can look here, right? So if you were to measure these, right?
So, this one's kind of different because I
That's funny.
Probably because you're throwing scales. Oh, you can have each.
I have that 1/2 inch.
I wouldn't worry too much about it. So I wouldn't worry too much about what it says up in that top box. Let me show you, because that looks correct.
That's what,
That looks correct.
when I measured it, it showed like an 1/8 of an inch or something. Or not an 1/8.
So it's about half. Yeah. 3/8 is just slightly, because, and you can't snap typically. So I wouldn't worry too much about what it says up in this dialog box. Like this is half inch, right? Or I wouldn't worry too much about that. And I say that because the size of the text, you're not going to have to drop down and change any of these. The size of the text will be controlled by that text style that you define. Okay. All right. So now when I go over here to my layout, okay, I can see all of my text over here, right? So that's single line text. Now I'm just going to do something tricky. I'm going to copy this piece of text over here. Okay. And I'm going to come over here to my layout, right? Here's one other really nice thing about annotative text. It has the ability to filter itself out of scales that it doesn't match. And what that means is that this has been assigned an annotative scale of 1/2 inch, which means that when I'm in my paper space, if I have a scaled viewport that is 1/2 inch scaled, right? 1/2 inch is equal to a foot. It shows up here. But because this is 3/4 inch, it doesn't show up over here. Okay? That may not be immediately evident why that's very helpful in AutoCAD, but let me just say it really is, right? Because on floor plans, a lot of times you'll have a floor plan that you have to print at several scales, right? You may have to print it at 1/4 inch is equal to a foot, and you may also have to have an enlarged plan that's like 1/2 inch or 1:1, okay? Which means that you may have 1/4 inch annotation on your floor plan, but also the larger scale, 1/2 inch is equal to a foot. So in a previous life, right, all of that annotation would show up in your viewport and you'd have to turn it on and off and filter it by layers, which was really cumbersome, right? Now, because of annotative text, the filtering of that is helped out by your viewport. So anything that doesn't have this 3/4 inch scale doesn't show up, okay? That's not to say that we can't click on our text, we can't right click and add other annotative scales. I'm going to add the current scale to this text. Or actually, I don't want to do that. I want to add another one. Hold on. We're not going to worry about this just yet. We'll get a little bit more into this next time. I add the 3/4 inch scale to that, right? I see my little annotative scale pop up, right? And now when I look over here, that shows up in that viewport, okay? Again, this may not immediately you may not recognize how valuable this is, but it's really, really helpful when you're working, okay? So that is one really nice thing about annotative scale. Okay, I'm going to show you multi-line text today, and then I think we're going to stop. I'm not going to get into any more of the annotative settings today, and we'll just kind of pick up where we left off last time because I feel like this is kind of a big topic to understand, and I want to go over it a couple times, right? So that you all know how it works. Any questions so far? You okay? You okay, Pauline?
Yeah, but
Okay. All right. Okay. So let's talk about multi-line text. All right. And I'm not going to assign an assignment tonight. I'm going to assign it next time. Okay. For text. For text. Is there another? Is that in Jameson's office?
I think so.
Jeez. Okay. Just kidding. All right. So let's talk about multi-line text. Multi-line text and single line text, right? We've seen single line text will allow you just to pop single lines of text all over the place, right? It does have annotative properties associated with its style, okay? Multi-line text will allow you to generate paragraphs of text, okay? And the way that this functions is I'm going to click on multi-line text. I'm going to click, and I'm going to draw a rectangle in the area where I want my text to generate. Click, click. And I'm going to start typing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? I could come in here, I could add some bullets. I could change the alignment of this, right? This text box right here functions exactly like a word processing program, like Word or something similar, right? Where I could select the text, I can come up here and I can change it to center, right? And it works. I can change the line spacing to double. I can add some bullets to that if I need to. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? I can select the text or let me do something else. Let me add a symbol. I can add a symbol like plus minus, right? So this functions exactly like Word, even down to the fact that it has a spell check associated with it, which nobody ever uses in AutoCAD, and they should really, right? But it functions just like a word processor. And the nice thing again about this is that it is annotative. I have created an annotative text style, right? And it doesn't really matter whether I use single line text or multi-line text. That annotative style is going to control the size of my text. So I don't have to think about it, right? I don't have to worry if it's going to be, 6, 8, 10 inches tall to then scale. I just start typing, okay? When I'm done typing, I hit close editor. And I have this piece of text. Now, regardless of whether I'm using single line text or multi-line text, to edit it, I double click on it. Click, click, really fast, and I can come in here, backspace, 5, 6, 7. When I'm done, I hit close text editor, okay? One final thing I'll say today, and then I'll stop because I feel like that was a good amount of information, right? Is that layer associations, we do have layer associations with text, okay? So they print out with a line weight just like any other object in AutoCAD. I can copy text, I can move text, I can rotate text, I can edit text, okay? The layer that you'll usually see text on will be an A-anno layer. So A-anno-text, right? And it's going to be probably something like a magenta layer, okay? Now, one thing I want you to notice when I created that new layer, guess what? It copied my viewport layer settings, so I'm going to uncheck that, right? But this means A annotation, so it's an architectural layer, it's annotation, and I have text on it. We'll also have an A-anno dimensions layer, okay? So all of our text, I'm going to grab some of this. I'm going to, ooh, guess what would happen? This was on the viewport layer, right? Guess what would have happened if I would have tried to print this text? It wouldn't have printed, right? Panic, sheer panic occurs at midnight when text does not print correctly. So I would grab this and I would drop down and I would change it to the text layer, right? And then that text would have the appropriate pen weight associated with it, right? Which is usually somewhat of a lighter layer, okay? All right. Any questions so far? All right. I feel like.
So what if you have text that is different sizes in model space?
Mm-hmm.
And you want them to both be the same size and print it on with the annotative function.
You mean like from viewport to viewport? That will happen naturally because this text right here, so we within our style, right? So if I look at within my text style, I've defined this text to be annotative, and I've said no matter what, I want it to print at 1/2 of an inch, right? And this detail over here is being scaled at 3/4. This one is being scaled at 1/2 inch, right? And is that what you're asking? At the different scales, how will they be? Or are you saying I want a text with another?
Because I wrote 2 different things, but I guess I just have to match the settings for each one, right?
To have them print the same?
To have them print at the same height. They're on the same style, I guess.
Yeah, yes. So if you created some text and it looks different from, let me change my style here. So this style is changeable, right? So if I take my text quarter and I start typing text, okay, over like right here. Okay, it's smaller. Okay, if I move this up here, you can visually see that it's smaller, right? And it's smaller because this text style is 1/4 of an inch tall. And this text style is, let me make this capital so they're, right? And this is 1/2 inch tall, okay? So size is really dependent on text style at this point, right? So basically I'm saying with this text style, I want it to be 1/4 inch tall. With this text style, I want it to be 1/2 inch tall, okay? And when I go into my layout, it prints the right size to illustrate that 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch size. Does that make sense? Is that what you were asking? Maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, how do you make it so it's always, like, when I type new text, or when I just type the command text, it automatically wants to go to style 1. You just have to specify.
You specify your style first. Yes. So if I wanted it to be under my practice style 1/2, I'd click on that first and then initiate my text command. And let me say this, these text styles, they're what we like to call in the Revit world a type-based kind of parameter, right? Meaning if I open up this style and I change it from Swiss LTBT to City Blueprint, we'll harken back to my EJC days, good old City Blueprint. There we go, and I hit apply. Any instance of that font that has that same name, that same type, will change, right? So this is a type-based style. That makes sense? Okay. Did that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Now here's the thing. You're going to have maybe 6 or 7 different font heights. You'll have 1/4 inch, you'll have 1/2 inch, you'll have an 1/8 inch, you'll have a 1/16 inch, right? But that is far fewer styles than you would have if you were using kind of the old system where you would have to have those same styles, but you'd have to have them at multiple scales, right? So you could end up having, instead of 4 text styles, 16 or 20 that you would have to choose from in order to accommodate all of the different heights for all of the different scales that you were generating, right? This is a complicated topic. Yep.
Do we do text according to the scale of the plot or whatever?
Yeah. Yep.
Or are we given a different scale for the text?
No. So that AutoCAD is working the text, the scale out for you. So you're just saying, I want my text to be 1/2 inch tall. And you're specifying that, right? And you're saying with the viewport at 1/2 of an inch is equal to 1 foot. So you're specifying the scale in the viewport and in model space, but the text you're just saying I want it to be 1/2 inch tall. Does that make sense? Okay. I always, whenever I get into the lecture about text, I'm always like, oh, we're just talking about text today. And I kind of always forget it from semester to semester how involved text is. Because it's just like, so there's a lot to it. Anyway. So I won't issue another assignment today. I will issue a text assignment. There is one posted if you want to take a try at it, but I won't officially make it, an official assignment until Wednesday. Wednesday we'll reiterate the idea of text and we'll get into dimensions. That is all. It was a lot, but that is all.